Good evening, theater goers of Hopewell Valley, and welcome to our first ever virtual fall play, The Importance of Being Earnest. My name is Katie Rochon. I am the director and the theater teacher here at the high school, and along with Jeff Kelly, our technical theater teacher and director, we welcome you to the show this evening. What you're about to see is a first for us here in Hopewell Valley. The show was initially, it was cast over video. The auditions were virtual. The students rehearsed outside, socially distant, wearing masks, with the intent that the final product was going to be filmed in their own homes, sometimes by you, the parents, friends, and family of our students, and then edited together by our wonderful video editor, Damian Bartolacci, into the final product you are about to see this evening. The cost of admission to this show is 100% free. However, we do ask if you are interested and able to make a charitable donation on behalf of the Actors Fund. You will see the link somewhere on this screen for you to click and donate. The Actors Fund is a wonderful organization that is serving right now to help benefit the people in the performing arts industry who are directly affected by the pandemic. As you know, Broadway has been shut down since the middle of March. And there's a lot of people in this industry who are struggling to make ends meet and still create the art that they are so known for. So if you are interested and able, please feel free to click on those links. Any contribution will be greatly appreciated. Additionally, we are also accepting donations on the behalf of our MTPA, the Music Theater Parents Association, who does so many wonderful things for everyone here in the performing arts. We thank them. Without them, none of this would be possible. So thank you so much. We hope that you enjoy the show. Sit back, relax, and enjoy The Importance of Being Earnest.
Did you hear what I was playing, Lane?
I didn't think it polite to listen, sir.
I'm sorry for that, for your sake. I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately, but I play with a wonderful expression. As far as the piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I keep science for life.
Yes, sir.
And speaking of the science of life, have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
And, by the way, Lane, I see from your book that on Thursday, when Lord Shorman and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Yes. Why is it that at a bachelor's establishment, the servants invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I attribute it merely to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I have often found that in married households, the champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Good heavens! Is marriage so demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I have had very little experience of it myself up to the present. I have only been married once. That was in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I don't know that I'm much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir. It is not a very interesting subject. I never think of it myself.
Very natural, I'm sure. Thank you, Lane. That will do.
Thank you, sir.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Rarely, if the lower orders don't set us a good example, what on earth is the use of them? They seem, as a class, to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Ernest Worthing.
How are you, my dear Ernest? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What else should bring anyone anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algy.
Well, I believe it is customary, in good society, to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since Thursday?
In the country?
What on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses others. It is excessively boring.
And who are the people you amuse?
Oh, neighbours.
Got nice neighbours in your port of Shropshire?
Perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
How immensely you must amuse them. By the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Shropshire? Yes, of course. Hello. Why all these cups? Why the cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance for one so young? Who is coming to tea?
Merely for Aunt Augusta and Gwendolen.
How perfectly delightful.
Yes, that is all very well. But I'm afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolen is perfectly disgraceful. It is almost as bad as the way Gwendolen flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolen. I have come up to town specifically to propose to her.
Well, I thought you had come up for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
But I rarely don't see anything romantic in proposing. It is very romantic to be in love, but there is nothing romantic about a definite proposal. Why, one may be accepted. One usually is, I believe. But then the excitement is all over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. Oh, if ever I get married, I'll certainly try to forget the fact.
I have no doubt about that, dear Algy. The divorce court was specially invented for people whose memories are so curiously constituted.
There is no use speculating on that subject. Divorces are made in heaven. Please, don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. They are ordered specially for Aunt Augusta.
Well, you have been eating them all the time.
This is quite a different matter. She is my aunt. Have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolen. Gwendolen is devoted to bread and butter.
And very good bread and butter it is, too.
Well, my dear fellow, you need not eat as if you were going to eat at all. You behave as if you were married to her already. You are not married to her already, and I don't think you ever will be.
Why on earth do you say that?
Well, in the first place, girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't. It is a great truth. It accounts for the extraordinary number of bachelors that one sees all over the place. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolen is my first cousin, and before I allow you to marry her, you will have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What on earth do you mean? What do you mean, Algy, by Cecily? Well, I don't know anyone of the name of Cecily.
Bring me that cigarette case Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last time he dined here.
Yes, sir.
Do you mean to say you've had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you had let me know. I've been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard and was very nearly offering a large reward.
Well, I wish you would offer one. I happen to be more than usually hard up.
Well, there is no good offering a large reward now that the thing is found.
I think that is rather mean of you, Ernest, I must say. However, it makes no matter, for now that I look at the inscription inside, I find the thing isn't yours, after all.
Of course it's mine. You have seen me with it 100 times, and you have no right whatsoever to read the inside of it. It is a very ungentlemanly thing to do, to read the inside of a private cigarette case.
It is absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't. More than half of modern culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
I am quite aware of the fact, and I don't propose to discuss modern culture with you. It isn't the sort of thing one does in private. I simply want my cigarette case back.
Well, yes, but this is not your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily, and you said you didn't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, a charming old lady she is too. Lives at Tunbridge Wells. Just give it back to me, Algy.
But why does she call herself Little Cecily if she is your aunt and lives at Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily with her fondest love.
My dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. That is surely a matter any aunt may be allowed to decide for herself. You seem to think that every aunt should be exactly like your aunt. That is absurd. For heaven's sake, give me back my cigarette case.
Yes, but why does your aunt call you her uncle? From Little Cecily with her fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I admit, to not being small, but why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle, I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all, it is Earnest.
It isn't Ernest, it's Jack.
You have always told me it was Ernest. I have introduced you to everyone as Ernest. You answer to the name of Ernest. You are the most earnest-looking person I ever saw in my life. It is perfectly absurd your saying your name isn't Ernest. It's on your cards. Here is one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany. Oh, I'll keep this as proof that your name is Ernest, if ever you attempt to deny it to me, or to Gwendolen, or to anyone else.
Well, my name is Ernest in town and Jack in the country. And the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that does not account for the fact that your small Aunt Cecily, who lives at Tunbridge Wells, calls you her dear uncle. Come, old boy, you had much better have the thing out at once.
My dear Algy, you talk exactly as if you were a dentist. It is very vulgar to talk like a dentist when one isn't one. It produces a false impression.
Well, that is exactly what dentists always do. Now, go on. Tell me the whole thing. I may mention that I've always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, and I'm quite sure of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by a Bunburyist?
I will reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you are kind enough to inform me why you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now, produce your explanation, and pray make it improbable.
My dear fellow, there is nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it is perfectly ordinary. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle from motives of respect that you could not possibly appreciate, lives at my place in the country under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Where is that place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing too, dear boy. I may tell you quite candidly that the place is not in Shropshire.
I suspected that, my dear fellow. I've Bunburyed all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now, go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear Algy, I don't know if you're going to be able to understand my real motives. You are hardly serious enough. When one is placed in the position of guardian, one must adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It is one's duty to do so. And as a high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce very much to either one's health or one's happiness, I have always pretended to have a younger brother by the name of Earnest who gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear fellow, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be very tedious if it were either, and modern literature a complete impossibility.
That wouldn't at all be a bad thing.
Literary criticism is not your forte, my dear fellow. Don't try it. You had much better leave that to people who haven't been at a university. They do it so well in the papers. What you really are is a Bunburyist. I was quite right in saying you were a Bunburyist. You are one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Earnest in order that you may be able to come up into town whenever you like. I have invented an invaluable permanent invalid called Bunbury in order that I may be able to go down into the country whenever I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you at Willis's tonight, for I have been rarely engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know. You are absurdly careless about your sending out invitations. It is very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people so much as not receiving invitations.
You had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the smallest intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I dine there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do dine there, I am always treated as a member of the family, and sent down with either no woman at all, or two. In the third place, I know perfectly well whom she will place me next to tonight. She will place me next to Mary Farquhar. Who always flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. And that is not very pleasant. Indeed, it is not even decent, and that sort of thing is enormously on the increase. The amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly scandalous. It looks so bad. It is simply washing one's clean linen in public. Besides, now that I know you to be a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunburying. I want to tell you the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolen accepts my proposal, I am going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecily is a little too interested in him. It is rather a bore. So I'm going to get rid of Ernest. And I suggest you do the same with with your invalid friend who has the absurd name.
Yeah, nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury. And if you ever get married, which seems to me extremely problematic, you will be very glad to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
That is nonsense. If I marry a charming girl like Gwendolen, and she is the only girl I ever saw in my life who I would marry, I certainly wouldn't want to know a Bunbury.
Then your wife will. You don't seem to realise that in married life, 3 is company, and 2 is none.
That, my dear young friend, is the whole theory that the corrupt French drama has been propounding for the past 50 years.
Yes, and that the happy English home is proved in half the time.
For heaven's sake, don't try to be cynical. It is perfectly easy to be cynical.
My dear fellow, it isn't easy to be anything nowadays. There's such a lot of beastly competition about. That must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives or creditors ever ring in that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I am able to get her out of the way for 10 minutes, so that you can have an opportunity for proposing to Gwendolen, can I dine with you at Willis's tonight?
I suppose so. If you want to.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who aren't serious about meals. It is so shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, Algernon. I hope you're behaving yourself very well.
I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
Dear me, you are smart.
I am always smart, aren't I, Mr. Worthing?
You are quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope not. That would leave very little room for developments. And I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry we're a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call on dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered. She looked quite 20 years younger. And now all the tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Gwendolen, you'll come here.
Oh, thanks, Mamma, but I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Lane! Why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were no cucumbers at the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir. Not even for ready money.
That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I am greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers. Not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed colour, from what cause I, of course, cannot say. Thank you. I'm going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. She's such a nice woman and so attentive to her husband. It's delightful to watch them.
I'm afraid, Aunt Augusta, I shall have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
I hope not, Algernon. That would put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he's accustomed to that.
It is a great bore, and I need hardly say a terrible disappointment. But the fact is that I've just received a telegram to say that my poor friend Bunbury is very ill. They seem to think that I should be with him.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, poor Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, I must say, Algernon, it is high time that Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd, nor do I in any way approve of the modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of life. I'm always telling that to your poor uncle, but he never seems to take much notice, as far as any improvement in his ailments goes. I'd be much obliged if you'd ask Mr. Bunbury, from me, to be kind enough not to have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It's my last reception. One wants something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season, when everyone has practically said whatever they had to say, which, in most cases, was probably not much.
I'll speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he is still conscious, and I think I can promise you he'll be all right by Saturday. However, the music is a great difficulty. You see, if one plays good music, then people don't talk, and if one plays bad music, people don't listen. But I'll run over the programme I've drawn out. If you will kindly come to the next room for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. It's very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the programme will be delightful, after a few expurgations. French songs I cannot possibly allow. People always seem to think they are improper, and either look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. But German sounds a thoroughly respectable language, and indeed I believe is so. Gwendolen, you'll accompany me?
Certainly, Mamma.
Charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I feel that they mean something else, and that makes me so very nervous.
But I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I am never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
Oh, I would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back into a room suddenly that I've often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I have admired you more than any other girl I ever met since I met you.
Yes, I'm quite aware of the fact. And I often wish that, in public at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you had always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I knew I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact is constantly mentioned in the more expensive monthly magazines, and has reached the provincial pulpits, I am told. And my ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Earnest. There's something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment Algernon first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Earnest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolen.
Oh, passionately.
Darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Earnest.
But you don't mean to say you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Earnest.
But your name is Earnest.
Yes, I know it is. But supposing it was something else, do you mean to say you couldn't love me then?
Ah, that is clearly a metaphysical speculation, and like most metaphysical speculations, has very little reference at all to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Personally, darling, to speak quite candidly, I don't much care about the name of Earnest. I don't think the name suits me at all.
But It suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has music of its own. It produces vibration.
Well, really, Gwendolyn, I must say that I think there are lots of much other nicer names out there. I think Jack, for instance, is a charming name.
Jack? No, there is very little music in the name Jack, if any at all indeed. It does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all without exception have been more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for John, and I pity any woman who is married to a man called John. She probably would never know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. The only really safe name is Earnest.
Gwendolyn, I must get christened at once. I mean, we must get married at once.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely you know that I love you, and, well, Miss Fairfax, you led me to believe that you were not completely indifferent to me.
Oh, I adore you, but you haven't proposed to me yet. Nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject has not even been touched on.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it'd be an admirable opportunity, and to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolyn.
Yes, Mr. Worthing, what have you got to say to me?
You know what I've got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long have you been about it? I'm afraid you've had very little experience in how to propose.
My own one. I have never loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. What wonderfully blue eyes you have, Ernest. They're quite blue. Oh, I hope you will always look at me just like that, especially when other people are present.
Mr. Worthing, rise, sir, from this semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing has not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I am engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Pardon me, you are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to someone, I or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come on a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant, as the case may be. It is hardly a matter she could be allowed to arrange for herself. Now, I have some questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. As I'm making these inquiries, you, Gwendolen, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mamma!
In the carriage, Gwendolen. Gwendolen, the carriage! You may take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you, Mr. Worthing, that you are not on my list of eligible young men, although I have the same list as the dear Duchess of Bolton has. We work together, in fact. However, I am quite ready to enter your name should your answers be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit that I smoke.
I'm glad to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
29.
A very good age to be married at. I've always been of the opinion that a man who desires to be married should either know everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I'm pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate exotic fruit. Touch it and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England, at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would prove serious danger to the upper classes, and probably lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or in investments?
In investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. What between the duties expected of one during one's lifetime and the duties exacted of one after one's death, land cease to either be a profit or pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping tap. That's all that can be said about land.
Well, I have a country house with some land attached to it, of course, about 1,500 acres. But I don't depend on that for my real income. In fact, as far as I can make out, the poachers are the only people who really make anything of it.
A country house? How many bedrooms? Well, that point can be cleared up afterwards. You have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature like Gwendolen could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
Well, I own a house in Belgrave Square, but it is let by the year to Lady Bloxham. Of course, I can get it back any time I like at 6 months' notice.
Lady Bloxham? I don't know her.
Oh, she goes about very little. She is a lady considerably advanced in years.
Nowadays that is no guarantee of respectability of character. What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I thought there was something. However, that can be easily altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the side?
Both, if necessary, I presume. What are your politics?
Well, I'm afraid I really have none. I am a liberal unionist.
Oh, they count as Tories. They dine with us or come in the evenings at any rate. Now, to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I've lost both my parents.
Both? To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth. Was he born in what the radical papers call the purple of commerce, or did he rise from the ranks of the aristocracy?
I'm afraid I really don't know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, when I say I had lost both my parents, it would be much nearer to the truth to say that they seem to have lost me. You see, well, I don't know who I am by birth. I was found.
Found?
The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an old gentleman of a very kindly and charitable disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing because he happened to have a first-class ticket for Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It is a seaside resort.
Where did this charitable gentleman with a first-class ticket to a seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
Handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, a handbag. A somewhat large black leather handbag, with handles to it, in fact. An ordinary handbag, in fact. I don't say in fact there, I'm so sorry. Yes, Lady Bracknell, I was in a handbag. A somewhat large black leather handbag, with handles to it. A rather ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew come across an ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given to him in mistake for his own.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station?
Yes, the Brighton line.
The line is immaterial. Mr. Worthing, I confess I feel somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate, bred in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life that remind one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution. And I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to. As for the particular locality in which the handbag was found, a cloakroom at a railway station might serve to conceal a social indiscretion, and was probably, indeed, been used for that purpose before. It could hardly be regarded as an assured basis for a recognised position in good society.
May I ask you what you would advise me to do? I need hardly say that I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible and make a definite effort to produce, at any rate, one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
Well, I don't see how I could possibly manage to do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment. It is in my dressing room at home. I really think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What is it to do with me? You could hardly imagine that I and Lord Bracknell would dream of having our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, marry into a cloakroom, and form an alliance with a parcel. Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Good morning. For heaven's sakes, don't play that ghastly tune, Algy. How idiotic you are.
Didn't it go off all right, old boy? You don't mean to say Gwendolen refused you? Oh, I know it is a way she has. She's always refusing people. I think it is most ill-natured of her.
Oh, Gwendolen is right as a trivet. As far as she is concerned, we are engaged. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. Never met such a gorgon. I'm not sure what a gorgon is like, but I'm sure Lady Bracknell is one. In any case, she is a monster without being a myth, which is rather unfair. Oh, I beg your pardon, Algy. I suppose I shouldn't talk about your relatives in that way before you.
My dear boy, I love hearing my relations abused. It is the only thing that makes me put up with them at all. Relations are simply a tedious pack of people who haven't got the remotest knowledge of how to live, nor the smallest instinct of when to die.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't.
Well, I won't argue about the matter. You always want to argue about things.
But that is exactly what things were originally made for.
Upon my word, if I thought that, I'd shoot myself. You don't suppose there's any chance of Gwendolen becoming like her mother in about 150 years, do you, Algy?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does. That's his.
Is that clever?
It's perfectly phrased and quite as true as any observation in civilized life should be.
Oh, I'm sick to death of cleverness. Everyone is clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without meeting clever people. I wish to goodness we had a few fools left.
We have.
I should extremely like to meet them. What do they talk about?
The fools? Oh, about the clever people, of course.
What fools?
By the way, did you tell Gwendolen the truth about your being Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, the truth isn't the sort of thing one tells to a nice, sweet, refined girl. What extraordinary ideas you have about ways to behave to a woman.
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her if she is pretty, and to someone else if she is plain.
Oh, that is nonsense.
What about your brother? What about the profligate Earnest?
Oh, before the end of the week I shall have got rid of him. I shall say he died in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die of apoplexy quite suddenly, don't they?
Yes, but it's hereditary, my dear fellow. It's a sort of thing that runs in families. You had much better say a severe chill.
You are sure severe chill isn't hereditary? Or anything of that kind?
Of course it isn't.
Very well, then. I shall say my brother Ernest was carried off very suddenly in Paris by a severe chill. That gets rid of him.
But I thought you said that Miss Cardew was a little too much interested in your poor brother Ernest. Won't she feel his loss a good deal?
Oh, that is all right. Cecily is not a silly, romantic girl. She's got a capital appetite, I am glad to say. Goes for long walks, doesn't pay attention to any of her lessons.
I would rather like to see Cecily.
I shall take very good care that you never do. She is excessively pretty and only just 18.
Have you told Gwendolen yet that you have an excessively pretty ward who is only just 18?
Oh, one doesn't just blurt these things out to people. Cecily and Gwendolen are certain to be great friends. I'll bet you anything you like that within half an hour after meeting, the two will be calling each other sister.
Well, women only do that when they have called each other a lot of other things first. Now, my dear boy, if we want to get a good table at Willis's, we really must go and dress. Do you know it is nearly 7?
Oh, it is always nearly 7.
Well, I'm hungry.
I never knew you when you weren't.
Well, what shall we do after dinner? Go to the theatre?
Oh no, I loathe listening.
Well, let us go to the club.
Oh no, I hate talking.
Well, we might trot round to the Empire at 10?
Oh no, I can't bear looking at things. It is so silly.
Then what shall we do?
Nothing.
Ugh. It is awfully hard work doing nothing. However, I don't mind work where there is no definite object of any kind.
Miss Fairfax.
Gwendolen, upon my word.
Algy, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Really, Gwendolen, I don't think I can allow this at all.
Oh, Algy, you always adopt a strictly immoral attitude toward life. You are not quite old enough to do that yet.
My own darling.
Oh, Ernest, we may never be married. From the look on Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. Few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Whatever influence I had over Mamma, I lost at the age of 3. But although she may prevent us from being man and wife, and I may marry someone else and marry often, nothing she can possibly do can alter my eternal devotion to you.
Dear Gwendolen.
Your romantic origin, as related to me by Mamma with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination, and the simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your town address at the Albany I have, but what is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
There is good postal service, I suppose. It might be necessary to do something desperate. That, of course, will require serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily.
My own one.
How long do you remain in town?
Till Monday.
Oh, good. Algy, you may turn round now.
Thanks, I've turned around already.
You may also ring the bell.
You will let me see you to your carriage, my own darling?
Oh, certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir.
A glass of sherry, Lane?
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going bunburying.
Yes, sir.
I shall probably not be back till Monday. You can put on my dress clothes, my smoking jacket, and all the Bunbury suits.
Yes, sir.
I hope tomorrow will be a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Lane, you are a perfect pessimist.
I do my best to give satisfaction, sir.
There's a sensible, intellectual girl. The only girl I've ever cared for in my life. What on earth are you so amused at?
I'm just a little anxious about poor Bunbury, that is all.
If you don't take care, your poor friend Bunbury is going to get into a serious scrape someday.
I love scrapes. They are the only things that are never serious.
Oh, that is...
Cecily, surely such a utilitarian occupation as the watering of flowers is rather Moulton's duty than yours, especially when at the moment as intellectual pleasures await you. Your German grammar's on the table. Pray, open it at page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well that I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German when he was leaving for town yesterday. Indeed, he always lays stress on your German when he's leaving for town.
Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he is so serious that I think he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanor is one to be especially commended in one so comparatively young as he is. I know no one who has a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
I suppose that is often why he looks a little bored when we three are together.
Cecily, I'm surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversation. You must remember his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother.
I wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here sometime. We might have a good influence over him. I am sure you certainly would, Miss Prism. You know German and geology and things of that kind that influence a man very much.
I do not think that even I could produce any effect on a man who, according to his own brother's admission, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I do not think I would desire to reclaim him. I am not in favor of this modern mania for turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. As a man sows, so shall he reap. You must put away your diary, dear Cecily. I do not see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary that we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles the things that have never happened and couldn't possibly have happened. I believe that memory is responsible for the 3-volume novels that the library sends us.
Do not speak slightingly of the 3-volume novel, Cecily. I wrote one myself in the earlier days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? I hope it did not end happily. I don't like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily, and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so, but it seems very unfair. And was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript, unfortunately, was abandoned. I use the word in sense of lost or mislaid. To your work, child. These speculations are profitless.
But I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden.
Dr. Chasuble! This is indeed a pleasure.
And how are we this fine morning, Miss Prism? You are, I trust, well.
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her much good to have a short stroll with you in the park, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily? I've not mentioned anything about a headache.
Yes, Miss Prism, I know that, but I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about that and not my German lesson when the rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, you are not inattentive.
Oh, I am afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from bees. Has Mr. Worthing returned from town yet?
We do not expect him until Monday afternoon.
Yes, he usually likes to spend his Sunday in London. He's not one of those whose sole aim is by all accounts his enjoyment. That unfortunate young man, his brother, seems to be. Well, I shall see you both, no doubt, at evensong.
I think, dear doctor, I will have a stroll with you. I find I have a headache after all, and a walk might do it some good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure. We might go as far as the schools and back.
That would be delightful. Cecily, you will read your political economy in my absence. The chapter on the fall of the rupee you may omit. It is somewhat too sensational. Even these metallic problems have their melodramatic side.
Horrid political economy. Horrid geography. Horrid German.
Mr. Ernest Worthing has just driven over from the station. He has brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, before the Albany bus. Uncle Jack's brother. Did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. I mentioned that you and Miss Prism were in the garden. He said he was anxious to speak to you privately for a moment.
Tell Mr. Worthing to come here. I suppose you'd better talk to the housekeeper about a room for him.
Yes, miss.
I have never met a really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. I'm so afraid he will look just like everyone else. He does!
You are my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
You must be under some strange mistake. I am not little. In fact, I am rather tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. You, I see from your collar, Uncle Jack's brother. My cousin Ernest. My wicked cousin Earnest.
Oh, I am not really wicked at all, cousin Cecily. You mustn't think that I am wicked.
If you are not, then you have certainly been deceiving us in a completely inexcusable manner, pretending to be wicked and really being good all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
Oh, of course, I've been rather reckless.
I am glad to hear it.
In fact, now you mention the subject, I've been very bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that, though I am sure it must have been very pleasant.
Well, it is much pleasanter being here with you.
I don't understand why you are here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back until Monday afternoon.
That is a great disappointment. I'm obliged to go up by the first train on Monday morning. I have a business appointment that I am anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Well, I know of course how important it is to not keep a business engagement if one wants to retain any sense of the beauty of life. But I think you had better stay until Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to talk to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
About your emigrating. He has just gone up to buy your outfit.
Oh, well, I certainly wouldn't let Jack buy my outfit. He has no taste in neckties at all.
I don't think you will require neckties. Uncle is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Yes, he said Wednesday evening at dinner that you would have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Well, the accounts I have received of Australia and the next world are not particularly encouraging. This world is good enough for me, Cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
Well, I'm afraid I'm not that. That is why I want you to reform me. You might make that your mission if you don't mind, Cousin Cecily.
I'm afraid I've no time this afternoon.
Well, would you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
It is rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
I will. I feel better already.
You are looking a little worse.
That is because I am hungry.
How thoughtless of me. I should have remembered that when one is going to be leading a completely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Thank you. Might I have a buttonhole first? I never have an appetite unless I have a buttonhole first.
A Marichenniel?
No, I'd sooner have a pink rose. Because you are like a pink rose, Cousin Cecily.
I don't think you should be talking to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You are the prettiest girl that ever I saw.
Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
They are a snare that every sensible man would like to be caught in.
I don't think I would like to catch a sensible man. I wouldn't know what to talk to him about.
You are too much alone, Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. A misanthrope I can understand. A womanthrope? Never!
Believe me, I do not deserve such neologistic a phrase. The precept, as well as the practice of the primitive church, was distinctly against matrimony.
That is the reason why the primitive church has not lasted up to the present day. And you do not seem to realize, dear doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray. No married man is ever attractive, except to his wife.
And often, I've been told not even to her.
That depends on the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Maturity can always be depended on. Ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green. I spoke horticulturally. My metaphor was drawn from the fruits. But where is Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us to the schools.
Mr. Worthing!
Mr. Worthing.
This is indeed a surprise. We did not expect you until Monday afternoon.
I have returned sooner than I expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you are well.
Dear Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
More shameful debts and extravagance.
Still leading his life of pleasure.
Dead.
Your brother Ernst, dead?
Quite dead.
That's quite a lesson for him. I trust he will profit by it.
Mr. Worthing, I offer you my most sincere condolence. You at least have the consolation of knowing that he was the most generous and forgiving of brothers.
Poor Earnest. He had many faults. But it is a sad, sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No. He died abroad.
In Paris, in fact. I received a telegram last night from the manager of the Grand Hotel.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
As a man sows, so shall he reap.
Charity, Miss Prism, charity. No one is perfect. I myself am peculiarly secular. When will the interment take place?
No. He seemed to have expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris? I fear that hardly points to any serious state of mind at the last. You would no doubt make some slight allusion to the tragic domestic affliction on next Sunday. My sermon on the meaning of the manna in the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion, joyful, or as in the present case, distressing. I have preached it at harvest celebrations, christenings, confirmations, on days of humiliation, and festal days. The last time I delivered it was in the cathedral as a charity sermon on behalf of society for the prevention of discontent among the upper orders. The bishop, who was present, was much struck by some of the analogies I drew.
Ah, that reminds me. You mentioned christenings, I think, Dr. Chasuble. I suppose you know how to christen all right. I mean, you are continually christening, are you not?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in this parish. I have often spoken to the poor classes on the subject, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
But is there any particular infant in whom you're interested, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was, I believe, unmarried, was he not?
Oh, yes.
People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
Oh, but it is not for any baby, dear doctor. I'm quite fond of children. No, the fact is, I would like to be christened myself this afternoon, if you have nothing better to do.
But surely, Mr. Worthing, you have been christened already.
Well, I don't remember anything about it.
But you have any grave doubts on the subject?
Oh, I certainly intend to, of course. I don't know if the thing would bother you in any way. I don't suppose you think I'm a little too old now.
Not at all. The sprinkling, and indeed immersion of adults, is a perfectly canonical practice.
Oh, I might trot round about 5, if that would suit you.
Perfectly, perfectly. In fact, I have 2 similar ceremonies to perform at that time. A case of twins that occurred recently in your own estate. Paul Jenkins, the carter, a most hard-working man.
Oh, I don't see there being very much fun in being christened along with other babies. That would be childish. Would 5:30 do?
Admirably, admirably. And now, Mr. Worthing, I will not intrude into a house of sorrow any longer. I would merely beg you not to be too much bowed down by grief. What seems to us bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Uncle Jack, I am so pleased to see you back. But what horrid clothes you've got on. Do go change them.
Cecily?
My child, my child.
What is the matter, Uncle Jack? Do you look happy? You look as if you'd had a toothache. And I have got such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother!
Who?
Your brother Earnest. He arrived about half an hour ago.
What nonsense. I haven't got a brother.
Oh, don't say that. However badly he may have treated you in the past, he's still your brother. I will go tell him to come here, and you will shake hands with him, won't you?
These are very joyful tidings.
After we have all been resigned to his loss, his sudden return to me seems peculiarly distressing.
My brother in the dining room? Well, I don't know what it all means. I think it is perfectly absurd. Good heavens!
Brother John, I have come down from town to tell you that I am very sorry for all the trouble I have given you, and that I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you're not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. I think his coming down here disgraceful. He knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There is much good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, who he goes to visit often. And surely there must be much good in one who is kind to an invalid. And surely there must be much good in one who is kind to an invalid and leaves the pleasures of London to sit by a bed of pain.
Oh, he's been talking about Bunbury now, has he?
Yes, Ernest has just been telling me all about Mr. Bunbury and his terrible state of health.
Bunbury. Well, I won't have him talk to you about Bunbury, or about anything else for that matter. It is enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
Of course, I admit that the faults were all on my side, but I must say that I think that Brother John's coldness to me is peculiarly painful. I expected a more enthusiastic welcome, especially considering it is the first time I have come here.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me?
Never, never, never!
Well, this shall be the last time I shall ever do it.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reconciliation is over.
You've done a beautiful action today, dear child.
Let's not be premature in our judgments.
You young scoundrel, Algy. You must get out of here at once. I don't allow any bunburying here.
I've put Mr. Earnest's things in the room next to yours, sir. I suppose that is all right.
What?
His luggage, sir. I have unpacked it and put it in the room next to your own.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a just-in-case, 2 hot boxes, and a large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can't stay more than a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Earnest has suddenly been called back to town.
Yes, sir.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack. I have not been called back to town at all.
Yes, you have.
I haven't heard anyone call me.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
I can quite understand that.
And Cecily is a darling.
You are not to talk of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. Oh. You look perfectly ridiculous in them. Why on earth didn't you go up and change? It's perfectly childish to be in deep mourning for a man who is actually staying with you for a whole week as a guest. I call it grotesque.
You are not staying with me for a whole week as a guest or as anything else. You have got to leave by the 4:05 train.
I certainly won't leave you so long as you are in mourning. It would be most unfriendly. But if I were in mourning, you would stay with me, I suppose. I should think it very unkind if you didn't.
Well, will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you are not too long. I never saw anybody take so long to dress with such little results.
Well, it is better than always being overdressed as you are.
If I am occasionally a little overdressed, I make up for it by being always immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous, your conduct an outrage, and your presence in my garden utterly absurd. However, you have got to leave by the 4:05 train. I hope you have a pleasant journey back to town. This bunburying, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
Well, I think it has been a great success. I'm in love with Cecily, and that is everything. But I must see her before I go, and make arrangements for another Bunbury. Ah, there she is.
Oh, I merely came back to water the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's gone to order the dog cart for me.
Oh, is he going to take you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Then have we got to part?
I'm afraid so. It's a very painful parting.
It is always painful to part from one who someone has known for a very brief space of time. The absence of an old friend one can endure with equanimity, but even a momentary separation from someone who one has just met is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
It can wait, Merriman. For 5 minutes?
Yes.
I hope, Cecily, I shall not offend you if I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be in every way the visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Earnest. If you allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
Do you rarely keep a diary? I'd give anything to look at it. May I?
Oh, no. You see, it is simply a very young girl's record of her own thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. When it is in volume form, I pray that you will get a copy of it. But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I have reached absolute perfection. You can go on. I am quite ready for more. Oh, don't cough, Ernest. When one is dictating, one should speak fluently and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell a cough.
Cecily, ever since I first looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I've dared to love you wildly, passionately, hopelessly, devotedly.
I don't think that you should tell me that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily!
The dog cart is waiting, sir.
Tell her to come around next week at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack would be very annoyed if he knew you were staying on till next week at the same hour.
I don't care about Jack. I don't care about anybody but you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
You silly boy, of course. Why, we've been engaged the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months?
Yes, it will be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
But how did we ever become engaged?
Well, ever since dear Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you of course have formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And of course, a man who is much talked about is always very attractive. One feels there must be something in him after all. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Darling. And when was the engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February last, worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to settle the matter one way or the other, and after a long struggle with myself, I finally accepted you under this dear old tree here. The next day, I bought this little ring in your name. And this is the true lover's bangle with the lover's knot, which I promised you to always wear.
Did I give you this? It's very pretty, isn't it?
Yes, you've wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I've always given you for leading such a bad life. Oh, and this is the box in which I keep all your dear letters.
My letters! But my dear sweet Cecily, I have never written you any letters.
You need hardly to remind me of that, Ernest. I remember too well that I was forced to write your letters for you. I always wrote 3 times a week, and sometimes oftener.
Oh, do let me read them, Cecily.
Oh, I couldn't possibly. They would make you far too conceited. The 3 you wrote me after our engagement was broken off were so beautiful and so badly spelled that even now I can't read them without crying a little.
But was our engagement ever broken off?
Of course it was. On the 22nd of last March. You can read the entry if you'd like. Today I broke off my engagement with Ernest. I feel it is better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
But why on earth did you break it off? What had I done? I had done nothing at all. Cecily, I am very much hurt indeed to hear you broke it off, particularly when the weather was so charming.
It would hardly have been a real engagement if it hadn't been broken off at least once. But I forgave you before the week was out.
Oh, what a perfect angel you are.
You dear romantic boy. I hope your hair curls naturally, does it?
Yes, darling, with a little help from others.
I am so glad.
You'll never break off our engagement again, Cecily?
I don't think I could break it off now that we've actually met. Besides, there is still the question of your name.
Yes, of course.
You must not laugh at me, darling, but it had always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone whose name was Earnest. The name alone inspires absolute confidence. I pity any poor married woman whose husband is not called Earnest.
But, my dear child, do you mean to say you could not love me if I had some other name?
But what name?
Oh, any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
But I don't like the name of Algernon.
Well, my dear, sweet Cecily, I really can't see why you should object to the name of Algernon. It is not at all a bad name. In fact, it is rather an aristocratic name. Half of the chaps who get into the bankruptcy court are called Algernon. But really, Cecily, if my name was Algy, couldn't you love me?
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character, but I feel I could not give you my undivided attention.
Your rector here is, I suppose, thoroughly experienced in all the rites and practices of the church?
Yes, Dr. Chasuble is a most learned man. He has never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
I must see him at once on a most important christening. I mean, on most important business.
Oh.
I shan't be away more than half an hour.
Considering that we've been engaged since the 14th of February last, and that we've only met today for the first time, I think it is rather harsh of you to leave me for such a period of time as half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy he is! I like his hair so much. I must enter his remarks into my diary.
Miss Fairfax has called to see Mr. Worthing on very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in his library?
Mr. Worthing has gone in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Tell the lady to come here, and you can bring tea.
Yes, miss.
Miss Fairfax, I suppose one of the many good elderly women whom are associated with Mr. Worthing in some philanthropic work in London. I don't like women who are in philanthropic work. It is so forward of them.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray, let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Oh, Cecily Cardew. What a very sweet name. Something tells me we are going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say, and my first impressions of people are never wrong.
How nice of you to like me after we have known each other such a comparatively short time. Pray, sit down.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
With pleasure.
And you will always call me Gwendolyn, won't you?
If you wish.
Then it is all quite settled then.
I hope so.
Perhaps this might be a favourable opportunity for my mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You've heard of Papa, I suppose.
I don't think so.
Outside our family circle, Papa, I'm glad to say, is entirely unknown, and I think that is exactly how it should be. The home seems to me to be the proper sphere for the man, and once a man begins to neglect his domestic duties, he becomes painfully effeminate, and I don't like that. It makes men so very attractive. Cecily, Mamma, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. It's part of her system. So do you mind me looking at you through my glasses?
Oh, not at all, Gwendolyn. I am very fond of being looked at.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose.
Oh, no. I live here.
Really? Your mother, or some female relative of advanced years, resides here also?
No, I have no mother, nor any relations.
Indeed.
My dear guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes, I am Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh! Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a ward. Oh, how secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I am very fond of you, Cecily. I have liked you ever since the moment that I met you. But now that I know that you're Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help expressing a wish that you were, well, just a little older than you seem to be, and not quite so very alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly...
Pray do. I feel that whenever one has something unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
Well, to speak with perfect candor, I wish that you were fully 42 and more than usually plain. Ernest has a strong, upright nature. He's the very soul of truth and honor. Disloyalty will be as impossible to him as deception. But even the men with the most noblest possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the physical charms of others. Modern, no less ancient history supplies us with many the most painful examples of what I refer to. If it were not so, history would be quite unreadable.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolyn. Did you say Ernest?
Yes.
Oh, but it is not Mr. Earnest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother. His elder brother.
Oh, it is strange. Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
Oh, I'm sorry to say they have not been on good terms for a long time.
That accounts for it. And now that I think of it, I've never heard any man ever mention his brother. The subject seems most distasteful to most men. Oh, you've lifted a load from my mind, Cecily. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible for Cloud to come across a friendship like ours, would it not? Of course, you are quite sure that it is not Mr. Earnest Worthing who is your guardian.
Quite sure. In fact, I'm going to be his.
I beg your pardon.
Dearest Gwendolyn, there is no reason why I should make of it a secret to you. Our little county newspaper is sure to chronicle the fact next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
Oh, my darling Cecily, I fear there must be some slight error. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement will appear on the Morning Post Saturday the latest.
I'm afraid you must be under some misconception. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
It is certainly very curious, for Mr. Ernest Worthing asked me to be his wife yesterday at 5:30. If you care to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel without my diary. One must always have something sensational to read in the train. I am so sorry if it is any disappointment to you, but I'm afraid I have prior claim.
It would distress me more than I can tell you, dearest Gwendolyn, if it caused you any mental or physical anguish. But I feel bound to point out that since Ernest has proposed to you, he clearly has changed his mind.
If the poor fellow had been entrapped into any foolish promise, I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy may have gotten himself into, I will never reproach him with it after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On any occasion of this kind, it becomes more than one's moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you? This is no time for wearing the shallow mask of manners. When I see spade, I call it spade.
Well, I am glad to say I've never seen a spade. It is quite obvious that our social spheres are widely different.
Shall I lay to here as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual.
Are there many interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Oh, yes. A great many. From the top of one of the hills, quite close, one can see 5 counties. Hand that to Miss Fairfax.
Oh, 5 counties? I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
I suppose that is why you live in town.
Quite a well-kept garden you have, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there were any flowers in the country.
Yes, flowers are as common here, Miss Fairfax, as people are in London.
Personally, I cannot understand how anybody manages to exist in the country, if anybody who is anybody does. The country bores me to death.
Ah, this is what the newspapers call agricultural depression, is it not? I believe the aristocracy are suffering very much from it just at present. It is almost an epidemic amongst them, I have been told. May I offer you some tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you. Detestable girl, but I require tea.
Sugar?
Oh, no, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen in the best houses nowadays.
Hand that to Miss Fairfax.
You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar, and though I most distinctly asked for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature, but I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths which I would not go.
From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt that you were false and deceitful. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I am trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of a similar character to make in the neighborhood.
Ernest, my own Ernest.
Gwendolyn, darling!
A moment. May I ask, are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
To dear little Cecily? Oh, why, of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I knew there must be some misunderstanding. That man who's standing next to you is my dear guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon?
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack? Oh!
Here is Ernest.
My own
A
love.
moment, Ernest. Are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
What young lady? Good heavens! Gwendolyn!
Yes, to good heavens, Gwendolyn. I mean, Gwendolyn.
No, oh, Cecily, good heavens, who could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I felt there was some slight error. That man standing next to you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief? Oh! Are you called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Oh.
Is your name really Jack?
I could deny it if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked. But my name is really John. It has been John for years.
A gross deception has been practiced on both of us.
Oh, my poor wounded Cecily.
My sweet, wronged Gwendolyn.
You will call me sister, will you not?
There's just one question I would like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
Oh, an admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, there's just one question I'd like to be put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, so it is a matter of importance for us to know where your brother Ernest is at present.
Gwendolyn, Cecily, it is quite painful for me to be forced to speak the truth to you. It is the first time in my life I have ever been reduced to such a painful position, and I am quite inexperienced in it. But I will tell you quite frankly that I have no brother, Ernest. I have no brother at all. I have never had a brother, and I certainly have no intention of ever having a brother in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
You've never had a brother of any kind?
No, not even of any kind.
Then it is quite clear, Cecily, that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone.
It is not a very pleasant position for any young girl to find herself in.
Let us venture into the house. They will hardly come after us there.
No, men are so cowardly, aren't they?
This ghastly state of things is what you call bunburying, I suppose.
Yes, and a perfectly wonderful Bunbury it is. The most wonderful Bunbury I've ever had in my life.
Well, you've no right whatsoever to Bunbury here.
That is absurd. One has a right to Bunbury anywhere one chooses. Every serious Bunburyist knows that.
Serious Bunburyist? Good heavens.
Well, one must be serious about something if one ever wants to have any amusement in life. I happen to be serious about Bunbury. What on earth you are serious about, I haven't got the remotest idea. About everything I should fancy. You have such an absolutely trivial nature.
Well, the only consolation I have in the whole of this wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to run down to the country quite so often as you used to, and a very good thing, too.
Your brother is a little off-colour, dear Jack. You won't be able to disappear to London quite so frequently as your wicked custom was. And not a bad thing either.
As for your conduct toward Miss Cardew, I must say that your taking in a sweet, simple, innocent girl like that is quite inexcusable, to say nothing of the fact that she is my ward.
Well, I can see no possible defense at all for your deceiving a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
I wanted to be engaged to Gwendolyn. That is all. I love her.
Well, I simply wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
There is certainly no chance of your marrying Miss Cardew.
Well, I don't think there is much likelihood, Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax being united.
That is no business of yours.
If it was my business, I wouldn't talk about it. It is very vulgar to talk about one's business. Only people like stockbrokers do that, and then merely at dinner parties.
How you can sit there calmly eating muffins while we are in this horrible trouble I can't make out. You seem to me to be perfectly heartless.
Well, I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would probably get on my cuffs. One should always eat muffins quite calmly. It is the only way to eat them.
I say it is perfectly heartless of you eating muffins at all, under the circumstances.
When I am in trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. Oh, indeed, when I am in really great trouble, as anyone who knows me intimately will tell you, I refuse everything except food and drink. At the present moment, I'm eating muffins because I am unhappy. Besides, I am particularly fond of muffins.
Well, that is no reason why you should eat them all in that greedy way.
I wish you would have tea cake instead. I don't like tea cake.
Good heavens! I suppose a man may eat his own muffins in his own garden.
But you have just said it was perfectly heartless to eat muffins.
I said it was perfectly heartless of you to eat muffins under the circumstances. That is a very different thing.
That may be, but the muffins are the same.
Algy! I wish to goodness you would go.
You can't possibly ask me to go without having some dinner. It's absurd. I never go without my dinner. No one ever does. Except vegetarians and people like that. Besides, I have just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:45 under the name of Earnest.
My dear fellow, the sooner you give up that nonsense, the better. I have made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened myself at 5:30 this afternoon, and I will naturally take the name of Earnest. Gwendolyn would wish it. We can't both be christened Earnest. That is absurd. Besides, I have a perfect right to be christened, if I like. There is no record at all of my ever having been christened by anybody. I should think it extremely probable that I never was, and so does Dr. Chasuble. You are a very different matter. You have been christened already.
Well, yes, but I have not been christened for years.
Yes, but you have been christened. That is the important thing.
Quite so. So I know my constitution can stand it. If you are not quite sure about your ever having been christened, I must say, I think it rather dangerous you venturing on it now. It might make you very unwell. You can hardly have forgotten that someone very closely connected with you was very nearly carried off this week in Paris by a severe chill.
Yes, but you said yourself that a severe chill was not hereditary.
It used to be, I know, but I dare say it is now. Science is always making wonderful improvements in things.
Oh, that is nonsense. You are always talking nonsense.
Jack, you are at the muffins again. I wish you wouldn't. There are only 2 left. As I told you, I was particularly fond of muffins.
But I hate tea cake.
Then why on earth do you allow tea cake to be served up for your guests? What ideas you have of hospitality!
Algernon, I have asked you to go. I don't want you here. Why don't you go?
Well, I haven't quite finished my tea yet.
Oh, and there's still 1 muffin left.
The fact that they did not allow me at once into this house, as anyone else would have done, seems to me that they have some sense of shame left.
They have been eating muffins. That looks like repentance.
They don't seem to notice us at all. Couldn't you cough?
But I haven't a cough.
Oh, they're looking at us. What effrontery.
They're approaching. That's very forward of them.
Let us preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly, it is the only thing to do now.
This dignified silence seems to produce an unpleasant effect.
A most distasteful one.
But we will not be the first to speak.
Certainly not.
Mr. Worthing, there is something very particular I'd like to ask you. Much depends on your reply.
Gwendolen, your common sense is invaluable. Mr. Moncrief, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
In order that I might have the opportunity of meeting you.
That certainly seems a satisfactory response, does it not?
Yes, dear, if you can believe him.
I don't. But that does not affect the wonderful beauty of his answer.
True. In matters of grave importance, style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer to me to pretending you have a brother? Was it in order that you could come up to town to see me as often as possible?
Can you doubt it, Miss Fairfax?
I have the gravest doubts upon the subject, but I intend to crush them. This is no time for German skepticism. The explanations appear quite satisfactory, do they not? Especially Mr. Worthing's. That has the stamp of truth upon it.
I am more than content with what Mr. Moncrief says. His voice alone inspires absolute credulity.
So do you think we should forgive them?
Yes, I mean, no.
True. I had almost forgotten. There are principles at stake that one cannot surrender. Which one of us should be the one to tell them? The task is not a pleasant one.
Could we not both speak at the same time?
Oh, an excellent idea. I nearly always speak at the same time as other people. Will you take time for me?
Certainly.
Your Christian names are still an insuperable barrier. That's all.
Our Christian names, is that all? But we are going to be Christian this afternoon.
For my sake, are you prepared to do this terrible thing?
I am.
Do please me, are you ready to face this fearful ordeal?
I am.
Oh, darling!
Lady Bracknell.
Good heavens!
Gwendolen, what does this mean?
Merely that I am engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Come here immediately. Hesitation of any kind is a sign of mental weakness in the young and physical weakness in the old. Apprised, sir, of my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin, I followed her here by luggage train. Her unhappy father, I am glad to say, is under the impression that she is attending a more than usually lengthy lecture by the University Extension Scheme on the influence of a proper income on thought. I do not propose to undeceive him. I have not undeceived him on any question. I consider it wrong. But of course you understand that all communications between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately from this moment. On this point, indeed as I am on all points, I am firm.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolen, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. Now, as regards Algernon. Algernon!
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
May I ask if it is in this house that your invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, resides?
Oh, no. Bunbury doesn't live here. Bunbury is somewhere else at present. In fact, Bunbury is dead.
Dead? When did Mr. Bunbury die? His death must have been extremely sudden.
Oh, I killed Bunbury this afternoon. I mean, Bunbury died this afternoon.
What did he die of?
Bunbury? He was quite exploded.
Exploded? Was he the victim of a revolutionary outrage? I was not aware that Mr. Bunbury was interested in social legislation. If so, he is punished for his morbidity.
My dear Aunt Augusta, I mean, he was found out. The doctors found out that Bunbury could not live. That is what I mean. So, Bunbury died.
He seemed to have great confidence in the opinion of his physicians. I am glad, however, that he made up his mind at last and went with some definite course of action and acted under proper medical advice. Now that we've got rid of this Mr. Bunbury, Mr. Worthing, who is that person whose eyes my nephew is gazing into in what seems to me most unnecessary manner.
That lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I am engaged to be married to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon.
Miss Moncrief and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
I do not know whether there's anything peculiarly exciting in the air of this particular part of Hertfordshire, but the number of engagements that go on seems to me to be considerably above the proper average statistics have laid out for our guidance. I think some preliminary inquiry on my part would not be out of place. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew at all connected to any of the larger railway stations in London? I merely desire information. Until yesterday, I was not aware there were any families or persons whose origin was a terminus.
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149 Belgrave Square, Southwest, Gervais Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Sporran, Fifeshire, North Britain.
That sounds not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses always inspires confidence, even in tradesmen. But what proof have I of their authenticity?
I have carefully preserved the court guides of the period. They're open to your inspection, Lady Bracknell.
I have known strange errors in that publication.
Miss Cardew's family solicitors are Messrs. Markby, Markby and Markby.
Oh, Markby, Markby and Markby. A firm in the very highest position of their profession. Indeed, I am told that one of the Mr. Markbys can be seen at dinner parties. So far, I am satisfied.
How extremely kind of you, Lady Bracknell. I have also in my possession, you will be pleased to hear, certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, whooping cough, registration, vaccination, confirmation, and the measles, both the German and the English variety.
Ah, a life filled with incident, I see, though perhaps somewhat too exciting for a young girl. I am not myself in favour of premature experiences. Gwendolyn, the time approaches for our departure. We've not a moment to lose. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, I'd better ask if Miss Cardew has any little fortune.
Oh, about £130,000 in the funds, that is all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell, so lovely to have seen you.
A moment, Mr. Worthing. £130,000, and in the funds. Miss Cardew seems to me a most attractive young lady now that I look at her. There are very few girls of the present day with any really solid qualities that will last and improve with time. We live, as I regret to say, in an age of surfaces. Come here, dear. Pretty child, your dress is sadly simple, and your hair is almost as if nature might have left it. But we can soon alter that. A thoroughly experienced French maid produces a really marvellous result in a very brief space of time. I remember recommending one to young Lady Lancing, and after 3 months her own husband did not know her.
And after 6 months, nobody knew her.
Turn round, sweet child. No, the side view is what I want. Yes, quite as I expected. There are distinct social possibilities in your profile. The wants of our age are its want of principle and its want of profile. The chin a little higher, dear. Style largely depends on the way the chin is worn. It is worn higher just at present. Algernon.
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
There are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Cecily is the dearest, sweetest, prettiest girl in the whole world. And I don't care tuppence about social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only people who can't get into it do that. Dear child, of course you know that Algernon has nothing but his debts to depend upon. But I do not approve of the mercenary marriages. When I married Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind, but I never dreamt for a moment of allowing that to stand in my way. I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
You may kiss me, Cecily.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
You may also address me as Aunt Augusta for the future.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
The marriage, I think, had better take place quite soon.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
To speak frankly, I am not in favour of long engagements. It gives people the opportunity of finding out each other's character before marriage, which I think is never advisable.
I beg your pardon for interrupting you, Lady Bracknell, but this engagement is quite out of the question. I am Miss Cardew's guardian, and she cannot marry without my consent. That consent I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask? Algernon is an extremely, I may almost say ostentatiously eligible young man. He has nothing, but he looks everything. What more can one desire?
It pains me very much to be forced to speak the truth to you, Lady Bracknell, about your nephew, but the fact is, I do not approve at all of his moral character. I suspect him of being untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew Algernon? Impossible. He is an Oxonian.
I fear there can be no possible doubt about the matter. Yesterday, while I was away in London on an important question of romance, he obtained admission to my house under the false pretense of being my brother. Under an assumed name, he drank, I have just been informed by my butler, an entire pint bottle of my Perrier Jouet Brut 89 wine, which I was reserving specially for myself. Continuing his disgraceful display, he succeeded in alienating the affections of my only ward. He subsequently stayed to tea and devoured every single muffin. And what makes his conduct all the more heartless is that he knew from the first that I have no brother. I have never had a brother, and I have no intention of having a brother in the future, not even of any kind. I distinctly told him so myself yesterday afternoon.
Mr. Worthing, after careful consideration, I have decided to completely overlook my nephew's conduct to you.
That is very generous of you, Lady Bracknell. My own decision, however, is unalterable. I decline to give my consent.
Come here, sweet child. How old are you, dear?
Well, I am really only 18, but when I go to evening parties, I always admit to being 20.
You are perfectly right in making some slight alteration. Indeed, no woman should ever be quite accurate about her age. It looks so calculating. 18, but admitting to 20 at evening parties. Well, it will not be very long before you are of age and free from the restraints of tutelage. So I do not think your guardian's consent, after all, is a matter of any importance.
Pray excuse me, Lady Bracknell, for interrupting you again, but it is only fair for me to tell you that according to her grandfather's will, Miss Cardew does not come of age until she is 35.
That does not seem to me to be of grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. London society is full of women who, of their own free choice, have remained 35 for years. Lady Dumbleton is an instance in point. She has remained 35 ever since she arrived at the age of 40, which was many years ago now. I do not see why our dear Cecily will not be as attractive at the age mentioned than she is at present. There will be a large accumulation of property.
Algie, could you wait for me till I was 35?
Of course I could, Cecily. You know I could.
Yes, I felt it instinctively, but I hate waiting even 5 minutes for anybody. I am not very punctual myself, but I like punctuality in others. But waiting, even to be married, is quite out of the question.
Then what is to be done, Cecily?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrief.
My dear Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew positively states that she cannot wait until she is 35, a remark which I am bound to say shows a somewhat impatient nature, I beg of you to reconsider your decision. My dear Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew states, she cannot possibly wait until she is 35.
But, my dear Lady Bracknell, the matter is entirely in your own hands. As soon as you consent to my marriage with Gwendolen, I will most gladly allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
You must be quite aware that what you propose is out of the question.
Then a passionate celibacy is all we have to look forward to.
That is not the destiny I propose for Gwendolen. Algernon, of course, can choose for himself. Come, dear, we've missed 5, if not 6 trains. To miss any more might expose us to comment on the platform.
Everything is quite ready for the christenings.
The christening, sir? Is that not somewhat premature?
Both these gentlemen have expressed a desire for immediate baptism.
At their age, the idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you to be baptized. I will not hear of such excesses. Lord Bracknell would be highly displeased if he learned that this was the way you wasted your time and money.
Am I to understand, then, that there will be no christenings at all this afternoon?
I don't think that, as things are now, that would be of much practical use to either of us, Dr. Chasuble.
I am grieved to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing. They savour the heretical views of the Anabaptist. Views that I've completely refuted in 4 of my unpublished sermons. However, as your present mood seems to be one peculiarly secular, I will return to the church at once. Indeed, I have just been informed by the pew opener that Miss Prism has been waiting for an hour and a half in the vestry.
Prism? Did I hear you mention a Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I am on my way to join her.
Pray allow me to detain you for a moment. This matter may prove of vital importance to Lord Bracknell and myself. Is this Miss Prism a woman of repellent aspect, remotely connected with education?
She is the most cultivated of ladies, and is the very picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. May I ask which position she holds in your household?
I am a celibate, madam.
Miss Prism, Lady Bracknell, has been for the last 3 years Miss Cardew's esteemed governess and valued companion.
Despite what I hear of her, I must see her at once. Let her be sent for.
She approaches. She is nigh.
I was told you expected me in the vestry, dear Canon. I have been waiting there for you for 1 hour and 3/4.
Prism! Where is that baby?
Baby? What?
A baby?
What? I did. What?
28 years ago, you left Lord Bracknell's house, number 104 Upper Grosvenor Street, in charge of a perambulator that contained a baby of the male sex. You never returned. A few weeks later, after the investigations of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was found at midnight standing alone in a remote corner of Bayswater. It contained the manuscript of a 3-volume novel that contained more than usually a revolting sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Prism, where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I admit with shame that I do not know. I only wish I did. The plain facts of the case are these. On the morning of the day that you mention, a day that is forever branded on my memory, I prepared as usual to take the baby out in its perambulator. I had also with me a somewhat old but capacious handbag in which I had intended on placing the manuscript of a work of fiction I had written in my few unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction for which I can never forgive myself, I deposited the manuscript in the bassinet and placed the baby in the handbag.
But where did you deposit this handbag?
Do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism, it is of no small importance to me. I insist on knowing where you deposited the handbag that contained that infant.
In one of the cloakrooms in the larger railway stations of London.
What railway station?
Victoria. The Brighton line. Oh.
I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolen, you will wait here for me?
If you're not too long, I will wait for you my entire life.
What do you think this means, Lady Bracknell?
I dare not even suspect, Dr. Chasuble. I need hardly tell you that in families of high position, strange coincidences are not supposed to occur. They are hardly considered the thing.
Uncle Jack seems strangely agitated.
Your guardian has a very emotional nature.
This noise is extremely unpleasant. It sounds as if he was having an argument. I dislike arguments of any kind. They are always vulgar and often convincing.
It has stopped now.
I wish he would arrive at some conclusion.
Oh, the suspense is terrible. I hope it will last.
Is this the handbag, Miss Prism? Examine it carefully before you speak. The happiness of more than one life depends on your answer.
It seems to be mine. Yes. Here's the injury it received in the upsetting of a gauge chute omnibus in younger and happier days. Oh, and here's the stain on the lining caused by the explosion of a temperance beverage, an incident that occurred in Leamington. Oh, and here on the lock are my initials. I'd forgotten that in an extravagant mood I had them placed there. The bag is undoubtedly mine. I am so delighted to have it so unexpectedly restored for me. It has been a great inconvenience being without it all these years.
Miss Prism, more is restored to you than this handbag. I was the baby who was placed in it.
You?
Yes, Mother!
Mr. Worthing, I am unmarried.
Unmarried? Oh, I do not deny this is a serious blow. But after all, who has the right to cast a stone against one who has suffered? Cannot repentance wipe out an act of folly? Why must there be one law for men and another for women? Mother, I forgive you.
Mr. Worthing, there must be some error. There is the lady who can tell you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell, I hate to seem inquisitive, but would you kindly inform me who I am?
I'm afraid the news I have to tell you will not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and consequently, Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother? Then I have a brother after all. I knew I had a brother. I always said I had a brother. Cecily, how could you have doubted that I ever had a brother? Dr. Chasuble, my unfortunate brother. Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother. Gwendolen, my unfortunate brother. Algy, you young scoundrel, you will have to treat me with more respect in the future. You have never treated me like a brother all your life.
Well, not till today, old boy, I admit. I did my best, however. There, I was out of practice.
Oh, my own! But what own are you? What is your Christian name now that you are someone else?
Good heavens, I had quite forgotten that point. Your decision on the subject is irrevocable, I suppose.
Oh, I never change, except in my affections.
What a noble nature you have, Gwendolen.
Then the question had better be cleared up at once. Aunt Augusta, a moment. At the time when Miss Prism left me in the handbag, had I been christened already?
Every luxury that money could buy, including christenings, had been lavished on you by your fond and doting parents.
Then I was christened, that is settled. Now, what name was I given? Let me know the worst.
Being the eldest son, you were naturally christened after your father.
Yes, but what was my father's Christian name?
I cannot at the present moment recall what the General's Christian name was, but I have no doubt he had one. He was eccentric, I admit, but only in later years. And that was a result of the Indian climate and marriage and indigestion and things of that kind.
Algy, can't you recollect what our father's Christian name was?
My dear boy, we were never even on speaking terms. He died before I was a year old.
His name would appear in the army lists of the period, I suppose, Aunt Augusta.
The General was essentially a man of peace, except in his domestic life. But I have no doubt his name would appear in some of the military directories.
The army lists of the last 40 years are here. These delightful records should have been my constant study. Generals. Malum, Maxbaum, Magley. What ghastly names they have. Markby, Migsby, Mobbs, Moncrief, Lieutenant, 1840. Captain, Lieutenant, Lieutenant Colonel, 1869. Colonel General. Christian names, Earnest John. I always told you, Gwendolen, my name was Earnest, didn't I? Well, it is Earnest. I mean, it naturally is Earnest.
Yes, I remember the General was called Earnest. I knew I had a particular reason for disliking the name.
Oh, Ernest, my own Ernest,
From the first I could feel you had no other name.
Gwendolyn, it is a terrible thing for a man to find out suddenly that all his life he has been speaking nothing but the truth. Can you ever forgive me?
I can, for I feel you are sure to change.
My own one.
Frederick, at last!
Cecily, at last!
Gwendolyn, at last!
My nephew, you seem to be showing signs of triviality.
On the contrary, Aunt Augusta, I have realized for the first time in my life the vital importance of being earnest.